ABC 10 meteorologist Brendan Minchef here. I want to talk to you a little bit more about the drought. And we've talked a lot about drought and how we are below average. Here in the Sacramento region specifically, we're okay. We're about an inch and a half behind where we normally would be on the water year, which is about to reset at the end of this month. But that's just specifically here really in Sacramento and in the suburbs of the capital city, and that's thanks to that big storm that we saw last year. Elsewhere, even in Northern California, we are still seeing quite a bit of drought. And this is because it's not just this year. This is a prolonged drought that's been happening over, as everybody knows, over the last several years, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. Severe drought is now 57% of the state. Exceptional drought still standing at 17%, mostly around the Fresno area. But this drought is actually impacting something that really we only grow in the Central Valley, and that's rice. California produces more rice than every state in the United States, except for Arkansas. But it's only grown in the Central Valley and especially in the Sacramento Valley. And if we want to narrow it down even further, that's three counties. That's Butte, Colusa, and Sutter counties grow a large amount of rice, especially of the rice that's grown in California. Most of that comes from these three counties here. Now, Colusa County is very dependent on reservoirs and on rainfall to grow their rice. There's not as much groundwater here, so they really need the rivers to irrigate the rice crop, and rice is very water intensive. Whereas in Butte County, been a little bit better. They have a lot more groundwater that they can use to irrigate their crop with, but specifically Colusa's been hurting for rice. In fact, California farmers have planted 50% less rice this year. And wouldn't you know, it has a lot to do with climate change and specifically the drought.
So rice is a crop that's grown a lot in California, especially in the north part of the Central Valley. And rice requires water in order to grow. And because of the drought, there's been a lack of water, as we know, in throughout the state. And in particular, the water that comes from Lake Shasta down through the Sacramento River feeds a lot of the rice fields up there in Colusa County, Glenn County, that area in the north part of the valley. And what happened is they didn't have enough water this year, and so they weren't able to plant rice. So the amount of fields that are planted to rice in California is down 55% from what they had planned because of lack of water. California usually plants upwards of 600,000 acres of fields to rice every year. And so that's down by 300,000 acres. And so that's a really big chunk of land that rice would normally bring in on the order of $900 million of total revenue into that north part of the valley. So by cutting that in half, that's a lot of revenue that's lost to that region.
Sometimes farmers plant in a certain field one year and leave it bare the next before planting in it yet again. This is called fallow. It doesn't have anything to do with one year's rainfall or the lack thereof. It's just part of the plan. An idle field is a field that a farmer thought they might plant but decided not to.
The category that's biggest though here is what's called prevented planting. So farmers can get insurance from the government in case of a failure of a crop. So what happened in the case of rice here is farmers said, we want to plant a whole lot of rice. And then they looked around and they said, we don't have any water. We can't plant that rice. So we were prevented from planting. So they're able to get some insurance payout for that prevented planting. So the biggest category by far this year and also last year is the prevented planting. And in California, that means mostly rice, but also some cotton.
Why have California farmers been unable to plant so much rice this year?
Because of climate change, we're in another long drought. We only got out of our most recent drought just a few short years ago. We're expecting to have more drought. So we expect that this is going to be sort of working towards perhaps the new norm rather than just an isolated 1 year incident. So that portends, I think, large potential changes in activities in that region. In terms of the total amount of rice that's lost, in proportion to all the rice that's grown in the whole world, it's not a huge amount. The rice that we grow in California is mostly a short grain rice that's used in sushi and a lot of sort of similar dishes like that. And so there's going to be less of that rice produced in California, but we can import that from other countries. And so people who still be able to get their sushi, and maybe it'll cost just a little bit more, but probably not a whole lot more. So that's where we are.
All right, so as for whether we could see a rice shortage similar to the Great Sriracha Crisis of 2022,
No, I don't see that happening.